Very early in the morning, the chief priests, with the elders, the teachers of the law, and the whole Sanhedrin, or council, reached a decision. They bound Jesus, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate. "Are you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate. He was given that information, of course, from the chief priests. "Yes, it is as you say," Jesus replied. The chief priests accused him of many things. So again, Pilate asked him, "Aren't you going to answer? See how many things they are accusing you of." But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Now it was the custom at the feast to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. I don't know which uprising this is, but there was no shortage of uprisings at this point in time, so it could have been any of them. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. "Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" asked Pilate, knowing that it was out of envy that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to them. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. Now, I do not know how many people were actually present at this early morning public event. Jesus actually put on the cross at 9 a.m. This is happening sometime shortly after 6 a.m. I don't know their customs or their habits back then. I do not know how many of the people in the crowd would have been part of the same crowd that Jesus had spoken to and who seemed to like him earlier in the week, and how many of them would have been the chief priest family and sycophants. I'm assuming the chief priest, most of the people in the crowd were plants from the chief priests, but I really don't know. It seems hard to me to believe that the same crowds who had listened to Jesus with delight as he confronted these people earlier in the week were this quickly willing to turn on him at the beginning, overnight, basically 2 days later. So my guess is that this early morning crowd was largely made up of people who either were the chief priests or their families or sycophants or people like that. But I really honestly don't know. "What shall I do then with the one you call the king of the Jews?" This is what I have to deal with. This is just what I have to deal with. This is life for me. I have to deal with this multiple times every single day. And I have for the last 9 years. If you have a child, that child will require all of your attention nonstop for a period of time. But the child will eventually grow up and will not require all of your attention nonstop for a period of, forever. I have cats who require my attention nonstop forever. They never grow up. There is no end. This is my life. Every single day, multiple times every day, I have to put up with this. And it will never end. They will not ever grow out of it. "So what then shall I do with the one you call the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked them. "Crucify him," they shouted. "Why? What crime has he committed?" asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, "Crucify him!" Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged or scourged and handed him over to be crucified. Now there is more to this than what we saw. Mark in this case gives us a very abbreviated account. Pilate was reluctant to sentence Jesus. Now, under the Jewish law, this death penalty of blasphemy would have resulted in death by stoning. They were forbidden from executing criminals under the Roman occupation, so they had to appeal to Pilate. And Pilate wasn't going to care about their blasphemy charges. That wouldn't have mattered one bit to him. So when they brought him to Pilate, they made it a charge of sedition against Rome instead. That would have mattered to Pilate. That would have been a deal. That's why they talk about the king of the Jews. They're saying that he is trying to lead a rebellion, as Barabbas apparently had, that he is trying to lead a rebellion against Rome. It no longer matters whether or not he's blasphemous against the Israel God, because Pilate doesn't care about that at all. But he does care if Jesus is stirring up trouble against Rome, and that will result in crucifixion. The punishment for that is death, not by stoning, but by crucifixion. And we read longer accounts of Pilate's interrogation of Jesus in Luke and John, and get the idea that he was not convinced by the argument that Jesus was leading an actual rebellion against Rome, but eventually did bow to the public pressure because he did not want a riot, and he did not want the priests to send word back to Rome that he was letting a seditionist or an insurrectionist go free. That would have endangered Pilate's position with Rome. And Pilate was not a well-liked guy. The Jews did not like him. The priests did not like him. Even the Romans didn't really like him. And he will eventually get recalled from his position, and no one knows what happened to him after that. So he is trying to keep a handle on the situation so that Rome does not get mad at him for potentially letting a seditionist go free. And that is ultimately what convinces him. This is a very abbreviated account, and we'll read more about it in the other Gospels. The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is the Praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. Now previously, Jesus was getting beaten up by the temple guard. These are now the Roman soldiers. They're going to be a lot more cruel. I mean, getting punched in the face or whatever they did with the temple guard is bad enough, but this is going to be worse. The flogging that we mentioned earlier, by the way, is whipping, and the Roman whips had little bits of bone and stuff attached to them that would rip into your flesh and pull away your flesh. Very painful. I wouldn't want to do it myself, and that was worse than the Jewish method of whipping. They put a purple robe on him to mock him for being a king, because that's the color of nobility, purple. Then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on him. And they began to call out to him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff, while he has his crown of thorns on, by the way, and spat on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they let him out to crucify him. So they're beating him in the head with a staff while he has his crown of thorns on his head. And this crown of thorns, by the way, when we see it depicted in a lot of our Western interpretations, it's a circlet that goes around this crown, okay? But it actually probably wasn't. It was probably a cap, because that was the style of crown in this region of the world. Western style crowns are circlets that go around the rim of the head. Or Eastern style crowns are skull caps that fit on top of the head. They probably took a tumbleweed and twisted it into shape and smashed it down on top of his head. So it's probably even worse than it's often portrayed in our Western style depictions, because we picture the crown as being like a Western monarchy type crown that goes around the head, but it probably was. It was probably a cap that went on top of the head. Let's go back to some of the suffering servant passages in Isaiah. I was going to do this in the last video, but decided to wait. Isaiah talks a lot about this servant. The servant in Isaiah refers to a number of different people or entities. As we go through Isaiah 40 to the end of the book, we see this image of the servant, and there are a number of different examples or types that are given. Cyrus is called a servant at one point. He's an example of a servant that God's going to use to accomplish his purposes. Israel itself as a servant, as a whole, is supposed to be God's servant. But the one that really stands out, of course, is the figure that will end up being the Messiah. And there are a couple of passages in Isaiah that really need to be called to mind here. In Isaiah 50, we get a picture of this servant. We'll start in verse 4. The sovereign Lord has given me, and he's talking, and me in this case, the servant is talking here. I mean, the prophet would have initially spoken this, but we're putting these words in the mouth of the servant. The sovereign Lord has given me an instructed tongue, to know the word that sustains the weary. He wakens me morning by morning, wakens my ear to listen like one being taught. The sovereign Lord has opened my ears, and I have not been rebellious. I have not drawn back. So I've listened to what he's told me. He has opened my ears to listen, and I have not been rebellious. I have listened to what he has told me. I have done what he told me to do. I offered my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who pulled out my beard. I did not hide my face from mocking and spitting. Because the sovereign Lord helps me, I will not be disgraced. Therefore have I set my face like flint, and I know I will not be put to shame, even the shame of death on the cross, which is the most shameful death you could die. But even despite all that, he knows that he will be vindicated. He who vindicates me is near. Who then will bring charges against me? Let us face each other. Where is my accuser? Let him confront me. It is the sovereign Lord who helps me. Who is he that will condemn me? They will all wear out like a garment. The moths will eat them up. Let's go down a couple chapters now. Chapter 52, starting in verse 13. This really should have been its own chapter, but oh well. The original text didn't have chapters and verses anyway. Now this is going to be God speaking about the servant. Rather than the servant speaking directly and speaking about God, this is now God speaking about the servant. See, my servant will act wisely. He'll be raised and lifted up and highly exalted. Just as there were many who were appalled at him, his appearance was so disfigured beyond that of any man, and his form marred beyond human likeness. And we just got done talking about how that would have happened, all the blows to the head and face while he was wearing that crown of thorns. So will he sprinkle many nations with blood, of course. And kings will shut their mouths because of him. But what they were not told, they will see, and what they have not heard, they will understand. Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender shoot, like a root out of dry ground. Something right now. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him. Nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering, like one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. So now it's the prophet speaking on behalf of the people. As we mentioned when we went back to when we studied the prophets a year ago, the speaker and the speakee changes a lot in the prophets, and it does it without warning. And they didn't have normal methods of punctuation and dialogue boxes and things like that we had today, or conversation formatting. They didn't have that. So the speaker would change, and the person being spoken to would change, just like that, and there would be no indication in the text that a change had happened. He's got to follow along. That's just how the writing was back then. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering. Like one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows. Yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgression. That hasn't happened yet, but it will when we read the text. Crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him. This is the cup that he had to drink. This is the cup he was praying about in the garden. It could not pass from him. Because if it did, we'd have to drink that cup. And it was not the Father's will for that to happen. And by his wounds we are healed. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way. And the Lord has laid on him, the servant, the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And who can speak of his descendants? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was stricken. He was assigned a grave with the wicked. We haven't read about that yet. We will as we go through the narrative, the crucifixion narrative. He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. For he had done no violence, nor was there any deceit in his mouth. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life a guilt offering, he will see his offspring and prolong his days. And the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand after the suffering of his soul. So he's going to be poured out as an offering. He's going to be offered up as an offering, and he's going to be cut off from the land of the living. But he will have offspring, and after the suffering of his soul, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore, this is God speaking now again, I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. We haven't seen every one of those items in that prophecy mentioned yet in the crucifixion narrative, but we will as we go. So they slid him out to be crucified. Actually, let's go ahead and start the video.